Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. Appreciate you and being with us today. I want to talk about the Raiders offense. Um, I want to make this very clear. This is not going to be an emotional discussion about the offense. It's just going to be a very ethereal, straightforward looking at it, dissecting and talking about it. Somebody who I greatly respect didn't attack me at all. It wasn't that type of a situation, but just said to me, "Wow, you've been, awful hard on Luke Getsy." And I thought that I had been very fair, but it was somebody that I respect. So I wanted to go back and spend time really digging, researching, and looking at it because I think that's very important. When you cover people, we have a voice, and it's important that that voice be educated. It's important that that voice speak honorably and unemotionally and just bluntly and truthfully. And that's where I try to do. Now, I want to tell you, we released an article today called Raiders Offense Makes No Sense. And I put makes no sense in quote because we spoke with five NFL people, players, executives, and coaches, and really protected their identity, but we wanted to know what they thought of the Raiders. Perhaps I'm too close to it. Um, all of that. So we wanted to get their perspective, and we have that to you. And that makes no sense was one of the quotes from the individual. There are some things I think that are very important to point out. Number one, and I said this to Luke Getzey last week, when a player makes an execution mistake, that's not on Luke Getzey. When a player makes a unforced dumb penalty, that's not on Luke Getzey. When a player gets injured, that's not on Luke Getzey. When a player doesn't perform well, that's not on Luke Getzey. And you could just start with the offensive line that has been beat up and tattered all year, and clearly none of that is Luke Getzey's fault. Now, if you're a big Luke Getzey fan, you're probably saying, "Ooh, Hondo's come around. Hallelujah to the choir." If you're a critic, you're probably ready to turn this podcast off. Neither of you should. Because as with most things, there's a big story to it all. The point that matters is the Raiders are 2-6, and there's too much talent here, and they shouldn't be. The point that matters is I told you the entire offseason there's some incredible um, uh, creativity by Luke Getzey that we saw. Now, 8 games in, there have been times that you've seen it, so you know it's there, and then it disappears. If they had had any kind of an offensive performance on Sunday, they would have beat the world champions, and they went on the road to beat Baltimore at Baltimore. Now, albeit midway through the 3rd quarter, AP just made the decision, "We gotta go. We gotta attack here." And that was him directing the offense that they went, and that's what he said. uh, that they did it and won in Baltimore. So it's important when you understand it's not just one thing. This is not going to be a Luke Getzey sucks. That's because I don't believe that. But the point is, he is the boss, and it's not working. Now, you need to go read the article. In the article, one of the people made the comment, I don't understand why, Gardner Minshew's had success in his past, why they're not going and watching the film of what he did successful and putting him in positions to succeed here. This didn't make the article, but one of the executives told me when you know your offensive line is banged up, there are things you don't ask other guys to do because they're not going to have the blocking and they'll just ask. That makes no sense. It's nonsensical. Brock Bowers, one of the men, this didn't make the, oh, maybe I think it did make the article. I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting, but, talking about why are you not studying things that he did at Georgia? He just should not disappear. Yeah, he has good numbers, but he shouldn't be disappearing. He's too good. You have to create ways for him to get open. for him to become part of the offense. All of that's fair criticism. Almost all of them, I don't know that all of them got mentioned in the article, but almost all of them mentioned that it literally just appears that the Raiders don't make any adjustments. They come out, they do what they do, and then other teams, defenses make the adjustment, and either the Raiders don't or they get trumped. Okay, that's all on coaching. That's all on coaching. And the point of the matter is, there are legitimate reasons that you can indemnify Luke Getsy with and say, hey, this isn't his responsibility. It's not his fault if a player jumps off sides. It's not his fault if a player makes lines up wrongly. Now, if it continues to happen, that's on him. Penalties, that kind of stuff. Injuries, not his fault. I mean, the offensive line has literally been held together with scotch tape and glue. But when you look at the lack of adjustments, you're like, what's going on here? Where are the adjustments? When you look at the offense can work and then it fails and you go away from it. I'm sorry, when you go down to the Rams, one of the worst rushing defenses, and you run 44, I'm past 44 times, complete, I think 21, and run 29 times, and the run was working and you go away from it. Or the week before, Alexander Mattison marches you down the field and you go away from Alexander. That's on coaching. And so this article was really meant, I wanted to get an unfair bias. And in writing this article with my boss and working on it, you really get a sense of, there seems to be an issue. One person said, I don't remember if it was a coach or an executive, you have to read the article, but this certainly doesn't look like a Joe Philbin offense. He's one of the best offensive minds in all of the NFL. And this doesn't look like he has anything to do with it. Another said, where is Joe Philbin's influence here? I had others mention, I don't think they all made it in, but more than one mentioned it's almost as if they must have too many voices on what to do because there doesn't seem to be any continuity and there's good people there. Now, I want to make this point because I think you know me. I want to be fair. That's critical to me. That's why I want to listen to people who say to me, you're being fair, you're not being fair. I think that's important. You can't blame Luke for the things he doesn't control, but you can blame him for everything he does control. Now, we don't know about the nitty-gritty of the meetings. Is there too many voices? If there is, AP's going to have to address that. If the Raiders' offense is as terrible in Baltimore as it has been, I'm going to ask Antonio Pierce about that after the game. Is there too many voices speaking into the game plan? I think that's a fair question. I don't know the answer to it. So if it continues, I will ask him that. And I think that's a very fair question. Is why does there not seem to be? I've talked about this lacking in identity. Now I want to read an email which comes to us from Jim F. Jim says, Hondo, you talk about scripted plays. Can you explain that to me? Yeah, no problem, Jim. I'd love to. So what happens is sometimes it's 10 plays, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 25. It depends on the coordinator of the team. You may have however many plays scripted. And the reason that you do that is you want to see what's the defensive game plan in these situations? How do they plan to defend it? So then I can think and adjust my play calling. That's really what it is. Now, I'll give you another example. I watched a team play one time that scripted. I think it was the first 20 plays. In the first play, they get the kickoff and run the ball down to the 1 or the 3, something like that. And the next play, they line up in an I formation, run it in for a touchdown. And jokingly, the offensive coordinator said, Nice script, huh? And everyone knew he was joking because that second play wasn't scripted. They didn't expect to be first and goal. So there are times when you're in a scoring situation, you may deviate a little bit from the script. The next time you get the ball, you still finish because what you're doing is you're gathering intelligence. It's what it has to do with adjustments. So let's say you come out, you jack the ball far, you go deep, you run seven. Now remember, some people call them sevens because that represents touchdowns. Some people call them nines because they're just flat runs. Let's say you at some point you usually want to have one of those in your script. You want to see how people are going to adjust. So bam, it works. All right. You don't go away from it. And there was an article in the quote about AP saying if something works, you can repeat a play. You don't go away from it. You know now, okay, until they adjust, we're going to keep running that play. Now, when they adjust, then you may run a different route deep to find out how they're going to adjust here. Maybe they haven't. But that's the chess game of an NFL football game. And it just appears that there are very few adjustments. Now, when I pressed people on that, I'm told sometimes it's too many voices. Sometimes it's a lack of creativity. Sometimes it's not having enough voices. Sometimes it's being stubborn. We don't know that. We're not in those meetings. But these are all legitimate things of why people in the NFL have said to us, it doesn't make sense. Here are the brass tacks. AP has a very good defense. Outside of the Carolina game, with all of the injuries and everything this defense has done, they have played exceptionally well. The Denver game in the fourth quarter, the tackling was terrible, but you could just tell they were completely exhausted. The offense could do nothing. That's not on them. This is a team sport. But they had, with all the injuries, significantly more on defense than offense, they're still held that world champion football team to where the Raiders should have been able to win that football game. That was uncalled for that the Raiders didn't win last week. And so when you look at this Raiders offense now, they're sitting here 2-6. And even with the injuries, there is far too much talent on this team to be 2-6. When you look at all the injuries and the bang up, okay, I could see, all right, you know what, 4-4, not good, but man, with all the injuries, 2-6, completely unacceptable. And if the offense has not changed, they're going to be 2-7 on Sunday. Now, I think this is a winnable game for them. So a Raider win would not shock them. But at this point, I would not call it probable. I mean, you lost to other teams that are worse than the Bengals. Now you beat some teams that were better. Ravens. But here is the brass tacks of the Raiders offense. They have to fix this quick because after this week, there will be no excuse. You got 2 weeks off. 2 weeks off till your next game. You're going to have to come up with answers. Because if you finish the first half 2-7, and let's say you go 2-6 down the road, you're now 4-13. There are serious problems with the organization. Now, I want to make someone made a point to me, and I thought it was a fair point. Well, they're without their starting quarterback. Well, but Minshew was the starting quarterback to start the season. So you're without your backup, who you moved to starter because your starter didn't perform well and he got knocked out. I'm sorry. I don't think that's a fair argument. I hear it, I understand it. I don't think it's fair. And here's the other thing. Everyone knew the Raiders had question at quarterback. I said before the year that, you know what? They're going to find out what they have in Aiden. There hasn't been enough sample size to think he's a bust. There hasn't been enough sample size to say he's not a QB1. You don't know. Okay, that's fine. They wanted Gardner. Gardner has not performed. Now, in talking to these people, I never even thought about, has anyone gone and looked at what he's done at other places? I didn't think about that. And clearly other NFL people are questioning whether they have. And he's told me, he said it publicly. This isn't fair to my teammates. I've never played like this. I don't blame his frustration. So I think there's enough blame to go around everywhere. And I think he is the boss, and it sits on Luke. Ultimately, it sits on Antonio Pierce. And ultimately, if Pierce doesn't fix it, if Getsy doesn't fix it, Pierce has to. And if Pierce doesn't, Mark Davis is going to have to. Everything rises and falls with leadership. I don't think it's fair at all to say this is all Luke Getsy's fault, but it is completely fair to question some of his decisions, players' decisions, and to ask yourself, what is the identity? We know what they want it to be. It isn't that. So what is it? I would love to be skinny, but I'm 238-pound man. I'm not skinny. I could tell you that I was a thong bikini model, but I'm not. Okay. You can tell us what you want to be, but here is a memo. You're not. And so it makes no sense. So with 9 games left, they have to figure out what they are, do the best that they can do. But there are a lot of people riding. Luke Getsy gets fired. He's not going to get another shot quickly at being a coordinator. Ain't happening. If Antonio Pierce gets fired, he's not going to get another chance right away, if at all. People have careers riding on this. And I'm not calling for anyone to be fired. There's a lot riding on this. And they've got to get it fixed. Like the guy said, this offense simply doesn't make any sense.